Yeah.
Yeah.
We just did on Wednesday, we just did our first in-person outreach event that we were able to hold since COVID.
Yeah.
And it was with the Girl Scouts of San Diego. And we partnered with them a lot. And it was actually called Dolphin Doctor. So it's a program that was inspired by Sam Ridgway. And it's basically about being a marine mammal veterinarian. And we go through a mock scenario. Okay, you found a dolphin on the beach. What are you going to do to work it up and figure out what's wrong with it? But it's really rewarding and fulfilling. It reminds you how cool your job is when 6-year-old girls are like, oh, I want to be like you someday. Like just makes you feel really good when it's easy to forget in the day-to-day busyness of it that, oh yeah, I was the 6-year-old who grew up wanting to do this.
Welcome to another episode of the Vet Life Reimagined podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Megan Sprinkle, and I have Dr. Barb Linnehan from the National Marine Mammal Foundation, where she's the Director of Animal Health and Welfare. She leads the veterinary and medical records team. She has worked for the NMMF as a clinical veterinarian since 2017, caring for the Navy's dolphins and sea lions. She's participated in the wild dolphin conservation work and assisted with the health assessment of dolphins in the Gulf of Mexico following the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. Since then, she's also developed research interests, including marine mammal cardiology, microbiome, and neurology. And really fascinating, she is a Lego veterinarian. Yes, Lego, as in the toy. She continues to inspire kids who may be our future veterinarians through many types of outreach programs, including her own YouTube channel. She is fascinating. So let's get to our conversation with Dr. Barb. When did you first know you wanted to get into veterinary medicine?
I was one of those little kids at the age of 5 or 6 who was like, I want to be a vet when I grew up. And I had a little vet kit that I got for Christmas and had fake gloves that I would put on. And I just never grew out of it. So the vet part and working with animals, I always knew. Marine mammals, I remember seeing manatees and then getting to feed a dolphin when I was about, I think, 5 or 6 at Epcot in Disney. And that was when I just became fascinated with marine mammals in particular and knew I wanted to work with them. And recently my mom actually found a book that was an illustrated short story that I wrote at the age of 11 that was Lisa Goes to the Dentist, and Lisa is a dolphin. Oh. And it's about the dolphin who's scared to go to the dentist. And so she goes to the veterinarian who's her dentist. And it was just really funny. She found it last year when I was doing a dolphin dental procedure at work. Like, wow, we've come full circle.
That's so perfect.
11-year-old me would be proud. Yeah.
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 Well, do you think you'll ever write a children's story too? Because we'll get to the part of you and kids again, but
it's definitely not off the table. Yeah, that would be really fun.
That would be cool. Well, so you're an early identifier, it sounds like. And so what was the vet school process as well? Like getting in and then just kind of, because it sounded like you wanted to work with marine mammals pretty early. So I'm guessing that was what you thought going in, and we know where you are now.
For sure. Yeah. And I can expand a little more on kind of throughout the ages, how I could, decided that was for me. So I remember the other thing that kind of clicked that I still remember to this day was in 3rd grade. I had to do a project on an endangered species, and I picked manatees because I loved them when I saw them at Epcot. And you had to, research, okay, what are their threats? What are their natural threats? What are their human impacts? And how are their numbers in the wild? And I just remember being so sad when I learned that they have no natural predators, like this big, gentle giant, and that humans were the cause for their demise. And I just remember thinking, like, I want to work to fix this, to fix things like this and protect these animals who aren't harming a creature, and, humans are the cause for their demise. So that's then when it clicked that I really wanted to work with marine mammals and, try to protect them and save endangered species. And, I remember kind of around that same age thinking through, my dad actually pointed out to me, well, you don't have to be a vet to work with marine animals. You could also be a trainer, a marine biologist, a scientist, a researcher. And so I remember him saying that to me and kind of thinking that through. And then I was lucky enough to get a behind the scenes tour of SeaWorld when I was in 4th grade, and from the curator there. And I remember asking her about this. Like, so my dad says I can work with marine mammals if I'm a vet or a marine biologist or a trainer, and asking for kind of his input. And I distinctly remember him saying, well, the vets kind of run the show and call the shots. And to me, I was like, say no more. I want to run the show and call the shots, which my family is now, not surprised at whatsoever, because as a little girl, I was what we used to call bossy, and now we call leadership. And so the natural leader in me wanted to be the one, pushing forward the medicine and kind of making the medical decisions. And so that's when I kind of gravitated towards the veterinary side. And then the more I went down that path and got more exposure to veterinary medicine, the more it just kind of reinforced that I love it. I love the medicine. I love the animals, putting it together and communicating it to the stakeholders. I learned about the Marine Mammal Program, where I ended up now, which, we'll get to how I got there. But my cousin is actually an astronaut veterinarian, and that's who Amanda Ardente was talking about in her podcast, in her episode, where she got her life-changing advice from him, which is so cool. Yeah. We're all related in some way. And so I learned about the Navy Marine Mammal Program from him because he worked with the dolphins in San Diego years ago now, before he became an astronaut. And I just, as soon as I became old enough to actually work, when I turned 14, I literally called the vet hospital down the street and was like, can I work for you guys? And I did not end up working in the vet hospital. They put me to work in the kennel. So I actually started working in a dog kennel. That was my first job. And I worked there for a few years, scooping a lot of poop, which I think anyone who is now in any form of veterinary medicine started out cleaning up some type of animal waste. Yep. We gotta put in that time, and then I ended up going to undergrad at Cornell for an animal science degree, and got, great exposure there to different animals. I grew up in a pretty urban city, so I didn't really have exposure to like cows and chickens and horses and that sort of thing. So I got a lot of exposure there, through that degree. And then I ended up working as a vet tech for a year before applying to vet school. And so I ended up going to University of Florida for vet school down in Gainesville, and got the aquatic animal health certificate kind of on top of my DVM degree there. And that's actually one of the reasons I chose to go there, because they do have a pretty strong reputation for all of the different aquatics experiences that you can get on top of, your foundation, your normal veterinary school curriculum. And when I graduated from vet school, I did a small animal rotating internship at Angel Animal Medical Center, which is in Boston, which is where I'm from. And it's a really, really busy, but private practice specialty hospital in Boston. So it's, one of the only places that's open 24/7 in the area and has lots of different specialty areas. So I did a year-long internship there. And even though I knew I didn't really want to stay with dogs and cats, it was still a goal to end up with marine mammals. It kind of all translates and all applies. So it was a really tough, but really rewarding year. After that, I went to the Vancouver Aquarium up in British Columbia, Canada, and I did a specialty internship there. They call it a fellowship because it's Canada. They have to be a little bit different. But that was an amazing year where they just have one veterinary intern at a time. I'm working under the head vet, Marty Helena. And you get to work not only with the aquariums, collection animals, but also the rescue rehab center. So it was kind of the best of both. I love both aspects of it. And the rescue center was really busy. That year, we saw 171 baby harbor seals that came in through the doors and had to be rescued and released. So yeah, it was a lot of work and a lot of fun. I really loved it there. And
baby harbor seals are adorable. So
they are. I miss them now. I really loved working with them, and they're so just adorable and fuzzy, and the sounds they make. They make a little banana shape when they're happy. If you haven't seen it before, definitely recommend Googling it because it's adorable. But yeah, I really loved my year there. And Vancouver as a city was really fun too. So when I finished that internship, I actually had kind of been at a crossroads of whether or not to do a residency. And then I was offered basically a fellowship with the National Marine Mammal Foundation. So I ended up taking the fellowship with the National Marine Mammal Foundation which is where I still currently am. So I did a 1-year fellowship and then was hired on permanently starting in 2018. And I've been there ever since. So now almost 5.5 years. And in 2020, I became the deputy director of medicine there. And now as of July, I am the director of medicine, or also known as director of animal health and welfare. So now my role there is managing a pretty big team of veterinarians and technicians, records office personnel, and then also clinical care responsibility. And so my job primarily is taking care of the Navy dolphins and sea lions in San Diego.
Yeah. And you just recently sat for some board exams, right?
I did. Yes. So just last month in October, I sat for the American College of Zoological Medicine board exam, also known as zoo boards or aquatic in my case. I'm happy to say I'm halfway done. So it's a 2-day process and you have to pass day 1 to get to day 2. So I did that part, but I have to retake day 2 next year. So I am half of a diplomat now.
That's a huge step though. And I really like hearing your journey because nobody's career journey is the same. Everybody kind of gets to places differently. And all these different experiences came before zoo boards. So kind of showing that there are different paths to get to different destinations, I guess you could say, in career.
Absolutely.
And you mentioned that one of these locations that you went to for an internship, there was only one spot. And so these opportunities can be quite competitive. And I know my own experiences, you often have to really search for some of these. So do you have any advice for people kind of in that early stage, maybe vet school stage, maybe even just early right out of it, recommendations for trying to get experiences in this area, and any kind of tips you give to people who express some interest here?
Yeah, those are great questions. And right in line with some of the things I like to point out to anyone who kind of asks me, whether I meet them at a conference or just online or via email, that there is no one correct path. If you ask myself and 10 of my aquatic veterinary colleagues, we probably all took very different routes to get to where we got to. And that's pretty cool and unique about this specialty in particular. There's not one straight path. If you want to be a surgeon, it's a pretty straight path. If you want to be an ophthalmologist, it's a pretty straight path. But for zoo, aquatics, wildlife, there's many different paths to get there and many different even niches within the community once you do get there. And so I like to just kind of remind students that that's okay. You don't have to take a certain path. You don't have to even do a residency. The residencies are fantastic, but there's only about 3. So that not many people can do those. And there are other ways to still get specialty training and get expertise. And you can take boards via the experiential route, which is what I ended up doing. And that's where instead of doing your residency and then sitting for boards at the end of your residency, you can work 6 years full time in zoo or aquatics and then sit for the same test. So it takes a little bit longer maybe to get that same level of detail or clinical experience, depending on where you work. And maybe the variety of cases you see might just be a little bit different, but you can still essentially achieve the same goal, which I think is really good to remember, because sometimes it's not a straight path. It can be a circuitous path, and that's okay. So I like to also remind students just to kind of be open-minded and not get too fixated on one certain path and destination, and be open to whatever opportunities might present themselves that you might not even expect. I never thought I would live in Vancouver for a year. That was never on my radar. And then when the opportunity presented itself, I thought about it for about a day and then jumped at the chance because it was just such a unique opportunity. And I'm really glad that I did. I absolutely loved it. So just remembering that it's okay if you don't follow an exact plan that you mapped out, and to be open-minded, and also to have fallback ideas. So my fallback was, I really do like emergency medicine. I could stay in emergency medicine. I love the cases. I love the, challenges that it brings. And then every day is different. Some of the exact same things I like about aquatic animal medicine.
Who is that?
Yeah. So it's great to have other things that you love and not be too fixated on one specific idea or position or path, because you never know where your career path might lead you, and to just be open to it. And I think the biggest advice that I received that I love telling our, vet students or pre-veterinary students is that it's not all about the grades necessarily. It's a little bit more about your experiences and are you a good team player? Are you a good communicator? And getting to know other people in the field, because it is a pretty small field. So once you kind of start making connections, and if you're a nice person that people love to work with, word gets out. And vice versa, if you're not a nice person, or if you're, a little unpleasant to work with or whatever it might be, word will get out of that too. And there are only so many spots to fill. So I think it's really important for vet students who want to go into this field to remember that getting a 4.0 GPA is great, but that's not the end all be all. I certainly did not have a 4.0 GPA, but being a good team player, someone who people genuinely enjoy working with and can communicate well with, that's way, way, way more important. Sometimes harder to demonstrate on paper, but when people meet you, they'll understand that and be able to see that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was good to hear about the different ways that you can be, qualified to sit for the board exam. That I think that's really unique as well, because you got to do a lot of different really cool things. So I know that I heard this in the podcast Aquadocs that Michelle has, who's a veterinary student. She's been on the podcast, and you were talking about some of the things that your organization does, including like the number of papers that you push out. So do you mind sharing a little bit more about the organization and remind me I just remember being blown away by the number of papers. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the National Marine Mammal Foundation, just kind of as a general overview, we're a nonprofit based out of San Diego, and we're actually not that old. We were just established in 2007 as kind of a branching off of the Navy Marine Mammal Program. And now we have about 150 staff members, and this includes veterinarians like myself, veterinary technicians, records office personnel, animal care and training staff. And then we also have a bunch of scientists and biologists and fieldwork people on our staff. So pretty varied staff. And our mission is to improve and protect life for marine mammals, humans, and our shared oceans through science, service, and education. So that's kind of what we strive to work towards all the time. And how we fit in with the Navy Marine Mammal Program is that we are contracted in. So we're not in the Navy. We are contractors for the Navy, and we help take care of their dolphins and sea lions who work for the U.S. Navy Marine Mammal Program. And then one of the coolest parts, in my opinion, about where we sit with the National Marine Mammal Foundation is we become, experts in the field of working with dolphins and sea lions because of the great care that we help provide to the Navy population. But then we're uniquely situated to then use that for outreach, teach other people about it, which the Navy can't necessarily do, or, it's not their mission to do that, but it is ours. And we can then apply that knowledge to other species. So that's kind of the coolest part. So we can take this incredible knowledge and working with every day the Navy animals, and then apply that to different techniques or different species. And so one of the really big efforts that's going on at the National Marine Mammal Foundation in the last couple of years is applying our knowledge to other endangered marine mammal species that might be under a lot of people's radar. So this all started with the vaquita porpoise years ago. And if anyone's unfamiliar with the vaquita, I highly recommend you watch the Sea of Shadows documentary. And one of the people featured in the documentary is my boss, Cynthia Smith. And she was one of the people in a big collaboration that led the effort to basically try and save the vaquita porpoise by actually catching them and learning from them in a captive setting, and then hopefully letting them reproduce and releasing them. And I won't spoil the whole documentary for you, but it wasn't easy and it was really challenging, but it kind of opened a lot of people's eyes to, wow, there's the most endangered marine mammal in the world. I've never even heard of it, and all the threats that it faces that are because of humans. And similarly, things like the Amazon River dolphin, the Indus River dolphin in Pakistan. Dr. Forrest Gomez is our director of conservation medicine. And so she and Cynthia Smith are kind of charging the way in that effort of trying to apply what we know from other species under human care, like bottlenose dolphins and purple porpoises, and how can we use that information to go help these other under the radar endangered marine mammal populations and save them before it's too late, before they get like the vaquita porpoise, where there's only, an estimate of 10 animals left in the wild. So that's one of the really unique things that we are kind of trying to use our expertise now collectively and help other populations around the world.
Wow. And it's so huge what you're doing with the amount of research that you're sharing and publishing, because I remember working in these areas of zoo and aquatic. There's not a lot of published studies. And so this is huge that we're able to do this research and get this out there and make people aware of it too, because that is when people actually understand. I mean, you can't blame people. The lawyer doesn't know about this river dolphin, but we can share it, and so that they know it's important and can help in the efforts to protect wildlife. So I love these initiatives. Yeah.
And that's something we're pretty passionate about, like getting the word out. So it's, really easy to find out something cool and keep it to yourself, but we want to go the extra mile and share our knowledge and, so that others may benefit from it. And that's something that Dr. Sam Ridgway, who is the founder of the Marine Mammal Program back in the early 60s and the original dolphin doctor, he was the president of the National Marine Mammal Foundation for many years and unfortunately just passed away a couple months ago. But we are never going to stop working to continue his legacy, which was that we have an obligation to the animals under our care and around the world, so we can continue learning and asking questions and figuring out answers to everything and then publish it so that others may benefit. And I remember he actually told me that when I was a vet student and I was just helping him in a lab. We were dissecting a brain together and he kind of instilled that in me. I just remember being so inspired by this man. And he worked up until literally the week he died because he just had this endless curiosity and he wanted all of the answers. And so he would find the answer to one question, and then he would have 10 more questions. And just his thirst for knowledge and the way that his brain was just never satisfied. He always wanted to, I answered this project, but now I have 10 more projects I want to do, literally until the week he died. It was just so inspiring. And I think if anyone has ever had a conversation with Sam, it's infectious too. It makes you really want to continue that work and continue having that mindset that we owe it to the animals under our care, the animals around the world, especially those who are impacted by human activities and are endangered. We owe it to them to learn more and continuously learn so that future generations don't have to start from scratch. They can learn and build upon what, previous veterinarians and scientists have done. And that stat that you mentioned is actually even more impressive for this past year. I think people were very productive because of staying home working. And our stat is now in 2021, the foundation authored 36 publications. So on average, that's one publication every 10 days for the last year. So it's a pretty impressive statistic. And those, of course, are not only veterinary specific articles. That's quite a range from bioacoustics and conservation medicine and also marine mammal medicine.
Yeah. And then kind of, slightly going full circle here is when you are educating and you present this information to children, then like yourself can be inspired to also continue the efforts. So you're constantly putting more people in who are also equally passionate about this effort. So I think that's really cool. And we just did on Wednesday, we just did our first in-person outreach event that we were able to hold since COVID. Yeah. And it was with the Girl Scouts of San Diego. And we partnered with them a lot. And it was actually called Dolphin Doctor. So it's a program that was inspired by Sam Ridgway and is basically about being a marine mammal veterinarian. And we go through a mock scenario. Okay, you found a dolphin on the beach. What are you going to do to work it up and figure out what's wrong with it? And we kind of go through a whole health assessment of a wild dolphin, which is a big inflatable dolphin that the kids love, pretending to be a vet.
but it's really rewarding and fulfilling. It reminds you how cool your job is when 6-year-old girls are like, oh, I want to be like you someday. Like just makes you feel really good when it's easy to forget in the day-to-day busyness of it that, oh yeah, I was the 6-year-old who grew up wanting to do this. And how cool that I'm now inspiring other kids to want to do that. And if even one of them ends up becoming a scientist or marine biologist or trainer or vet, then how neat is that I actually helped shape their life?
Yeah. And for those who are interested in learning a little bit more, Sam also has a book called Dolphin Doctor. I think I actually have 2 copies of it. That is how much of a nerd I am. But yeah.
I love it.
So if anybody's interested in reading more, there is a really nice book on him and his career adventure as well. So and also because I found the story really interesting as well. As part of the conservation efforts, you've been able to do a lot of different projects. And I think one that was quite public was an oil spill. So do you mind sharing a little bit of that story as well and your specific involvement in that?
Yeah, definitely. So I think most people might are familiar with the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, but that happened back in 2010 in the northern Gulf of Mexico, just off the shore in Louisiana. And it was the largest environmental disaster in human history, and tons of oil spilled into the Gulf and affected birds, fish, marine mammals, turtles, and even we now know there are actually impacts to all the humans who lived in, or some of the humans who lived in the area, or those who helped clean up the oil spill. So the National Marine Mammal Foundation got involved back in 2011, and I didn't work for them yet. So this was it. When I say we, it is really the big we in this part of the story. So in 2011, the National Marine Mammal Foundation was called upon to help assess the damage to dolphins in particular. And this was as part of a NRDA, which is a National Resource Damage Assessment. So if there's a big environmental disaster, basically assessing the impacts. And this effort from the foundation was led by Dr. Cynthia Smith and a whole team of experts basically to go out and actually catch some of the dolphins who live in Barataria Bay, Louisiana in particular, because that was a heavily oiled location with a population of well-known bottlenose dolphins who kind of live in the estuary area. And over the years, at least once a year, other than COVID, for the last 10 years, a team would go out every year to do health assessments on these dolphins and basically look at how did the oil impact them. And throughout the years, there have been numerous publications that have been put out by the foundation and in collaboration with many other partners. And the big highlights of how they were impacted is, first of all, many of them died. And population estimates are that it'll take about 40 years. If all goes well, it'll take about 40 years for their population to recover. And we could spend another hours talking about it, but now they're actually facing other threats like freshwater diversion from some restoration projects in the area. So not all is going well to even allow their population to recover. And then they're also facing things like really bad lung disease. And it's been documented that it's far worse than dolphins in other areas that were unimpacted by the oil spill. And things like adrenal disease. So they're basically unable to mount a stress response like a normal dolphin should because of the oil exposure. And then where I got to become involved in this, when I joined the National Marine Mammal Foundation back in 2017, I had the great privilege of getting involved in the cardiac portion of the story. And basically from other species, we were learning that the Deepwater Horizon oil was having cardiotoxic, so abnormal effects on the hearts of other species, like some fish and some seabirds that were in the area, and then even the humans. So those who lived around where the oil spilled and those who helped clean up the oil spill were having things like heart attacks and normal ECGs at an alarming rate compared to the normal population. So we thought it is logical now that these animals are in the same area and are eating some of the same things as other, animals I mentioned in the same food web there. And so why don't we look and see if there are cardiac effects on them? And some of the veterinarians in the previous health assessments the years before I joined had heard murmurs. And that's just an abnormal heart sound for anyone who doesn't know what a murmur is. And it can be pathologic or it can be normal. So it can be a problem or it can be okay. But you really don't know until you do an ultrasound of the heart. So in our project that we developed to look at the cardiac health of these wild dolphins, no one had ever done that before. So we actually had to kind of take a step back and say, well, first of all, let's look at our techniques and make sure we have our techniques kind of streamlined and standardized in managed care before we actually take that to wild dolphin health assessments, where you have a very short window to examine wild dolphins after you catch them and let them go. So it's really not the time to be kind of messing around figuring out your technique, because you have a very, very short window of time. And so we were able to work with the Navy dolphins on this project and essentially look at the heart health of the Navy dolphins while refining our techniques. So kind of win-win for both populations here. And again, kind of just a good example of how we're able to work with our Navy, the U.S. Navy dolphins, refine techniques, and then apply that to other at-risk populations. And so we basically looked at ECG, heart auscultation, and echocardiograms, or heart ultrasounds, and found that the dolphins exposed to oil had cardiac abnormalities that we weren't seeing in other populations. So we definitely just scratched the surface, or, have the tip of the iceberg in this story, because it was just one point in time. And we certainly need to follow up on these animals to see how things will change over time and, compare between different populations who might have different prey availability or different diving habits and, different home ranges. There's definitely a lot of variables involved. So there's definitely more to unfold with that story. And we're certainly not done looking.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just one example of a project that you became a part of. I think that's kind of a neat thing about conservation is, back to Dr. CM, there's always something new to learn. And so
Absolutely.
It's called job security. There you go.
Yeah.
It's fun to talk about these, neat things that you get to be a part of. But one of the things that I like to put in perspective is with every career, there's going to be pros and cons. And it might seem shiny at first, but it may not be the right path for everyone. So can you share some of your favorite things about this career path and the pros for you, but then maybe some of the challenges with it that you might feel is important to know if you're trying to decide if this is the right career path?
Absolutely. I think there are lots of pros to my career path and just to being in the world of wildlife and aquatic animal medicine. I think number one is that it's just fascinating and there's so much to learn, like we already touched upon, that it really forces you to continually be exploring and thinking of out of the box ideas. And it's just fun to sometimes be the person who gets to figure things out that nobody's ever done before. There are so few avenues left in the world that have been unexplored, and this is one of them. So it's just really neat to kind of still many, many years. Dr. Ridgway was in this field for over 60 years, and we're still figuring things out. So it's just really neat, and we're still trying to get to the same point of human medicine with, how can we evaluate these animals, or which techniques can we use, and just continuing to learn and really push the medicine forward. So it's just really rewarding in that we can never stop learning. And it does sound exhausting, and, sometimes it is, but we can never stop learning because there's a lot we don't know. And we need to continuously push the medicine forward and learn as much as possible, again, so that we can take the best possible care of the animals. And so we can pass that on to the next generation of veterinarians that comes along, so they can build upon what we learned, kind of how we did with Dr. Ridgway, who was at the forefront. He passed along everything to us, and then we took his ideas and tried to run with them or kind of expand upon them. It was actually a running joke at the Navy and Marine Mammal Foundation that if you thought you had an original idea, you had to bring it to Sam, because he would then tell you about how he had that idea back in the 70s or 80s, and he did a project on it, and you can read about it in a chapter or a paper that he published. So it was always an ongoing joke. Like, if you think that's a new idea, go talk to Sam first, because he's probably already done it, and he can probably give you some pointers so that you don't start from scratch.
Nice.
Yeah. I think, let's see, some of the other pros of the profession, it's really collaborative. It is a small field. And so we kind of try to get to know everyone in the field and work together, learn together, so that we can all kind of benefit from what everyone else is doing, so that we're not all separately working on the same thing and starting from scratch. And every day is different. That's one of my favorite things about this field. And not only thinking outside the box, but there's no mundane day when it comes to being a marine mammal vet. There are some days where you sit in the office more than others, but every day is, different and exciting. And the day that you think is going to be boring usually turns out to be the craziest and busiest and most exciting. And we also get to be jacks of all trades, which is pretty cool. There are certainly days where I wish I just knew, I have a friend who is a human elbow specialist. I'm like, that's so fascinating. You are a doctor for not only one species, but one joint in one species. Whereas we are marine mammal vets, we're trying to do it all. We are the ophthalmologist, the surgeon, the cardiologist, depending on the day, we're trying to be a jack of all trades. And often we have to team up with other specialists. So for instance, for all of our cardiac work, we have the dolphin and sea lion knowledge, but we team up with small animal veterinary cardiologists because they have the cardio knowledge. And together we try to figure out the answers to problems. And similarly, we work with a lot of human specialists, especially through the Naval Medical Center, particularly here in San Diego. So getting to be a jack of all trades is great. And then kind of teaming up with other people and collectively apply your knowledge is just really fun. And trying to, learn as much as possible from any given question or scenario or medical case. As for the cons, I can honestly say there aren't that many, but I think we make the least money of any specialty in veterinary medicine. Of course, none of us are in this for the money, but it is good to know going into it that you're definitely not going to be making a lot of money, certainly not as much as a human doctor, certainly not as much as a veterinary surgeon. And then the jobs are just few and far between. So it's a small field. It's not booming by any means. Someone has to retire or move on or move for a job to open up. And there's kind of a domino effect in the field of a few jobs opening up because people shuffle around. But they are few and far between in pretty competitive positions. So that's why it goes back to just, getting to know everyone and kind of being a pleasant human. That's so important so that you can get your foot in the door and kind of get into the field. But other than that, I can honestly say there are very few cons. It's a great career and I wouldn't do anything differently if I had to do it all over again.
Yeah. Well, and you also highlighted that you bring in small animal cardiologists and other specialists. So even if someone really, really was interested in some of these species, they may still have ways to work with them in slightly different ways, right? So they could
definitely
be a specialist that most of the time you're in a small animal clinic, but maybe you have a volunteer where you volunteer at the aquarium or the zoo, and you could be able to still have some interaction with these animals and then, zoo specialists as well. So I think, again, back to that, everybody's career can look different. If you're really interested in something, reach out. You never know. The worst thing is they say no, right? And then you ask again later.
Right.
So I think that's really exciting. Again, not only your specialty, but I think veterinary medicine as a whole, this is such a cool field that there's so many different things you can do, coming out of vet school. So it's really exciting. So maybe one day you get called to come in and do an echo on a dolphin. So that's pretty cool about our profession, I think. Yeah.
I completely agree. And I'll be honest, I didn't know I really liked cardiology until I had the privilege of getting to work as a fellow on this cardiac project through the Gulf of Mexico Research Initiative and just kind of fell in love with it. And in particular, marine mammal cardiology, because it's just fascinating with their diet reflex and how different they are from terrestrial mammals. And once again, like how much we don't know. And I have definitely toyed the idea of, do I want to just go become a cardiologist? And then I could do, be a cardiologist for multiple species. For now, I love the aquatics and the wildlife, so I don't want to walk away from it. But how cool is that we are in a profession where you can literally just change your mind and go work in a totally different facet of the same profession, and you can get specialized in so many different areas. I think it's really unique and just really cool that you could wake up one day and decide to change your veterinarian hat and go get a different specialty or just work in a different regard or collaborate with someone else. So it is really cool to think about. And it's endless opportunities within the same profession.
Yeah. As long as you're curious and ready to, like you said, embrace something new and learn something new, you can go really, really far. And beyond, I still think that this is part of you and your journey, but you have also done something that not a lot of veterinarians have wandered out into the world to do. And that is you are on YouTube. And I really enjoyed learning a little bit about this story and how you coming back to reaching out to children and letting them know that this exists and this is cool and it's cool to like these things. So do you mind sharing the whole story with Lego and YouTube and the story about the little girl, all of that?
Yeah, definitely. So it's been a really fun tangent and adventure that, again, I never thought would ever occur. So kind of the backstory, starting from the beginning, I one day last year randomly received an Instagram message from a casting agency. And that's actually really funny because with my job working with the Navy, I can't post pictures of my job. So it's not like I have this wonderful Instagram full of my pictures to work because I'm not actually allowed to post that. So my Instagram is just not super exciting. It's mostly my dogs. So I got this message that said, we are looking for a real veterinarian to play a veterinarian in a Lego commercial. And you seem like you'd be great. We'd love for you to apply. And, to be honest, when I read it the first time, I thought it was maybe a scam, but I was intrigued. So I responded. We went back and forth a little bit and they sent more information and they ended up calling me and essentially sent me a script. And it was a 10 or 14 page script, much longer than I was anticipating. Wow. And they asked me to film myself reading the veterinarian's part and send it in as an actual audition tape, which was just hilarious because I was having to Google all of the lingo. Like, I don't know what a slate is. What am I supposed to do in an audition tape? This is just nothing I've ever done before. And so ended up, my boyfriend helped me. He played the role of the little kids in the commercial. And I played the veterinarian and my dogs were in it and sent in this audition tape. And a couple of weeks later, heard that I actually got the part, which was obviously very unexpected for me. Never foresaw this ever being a thing. So it was really neat. I went up to LA and filmed. They had rented out a vet hospital for the day, and we filmed a commercial for the Lego veterinary playset. And so I was the real veterinarian, and there was a dog involved, and there were some children. Because it was COVID, we actually filmed at different times, so I didn't actually interact in the same place with the kids. But we made a commercial that I think it ended up being maybe 5 minutes long or so. And it's on YouTube, on Nickelodeon's YouTube for the Lego Friends veterinary playset. And so it was a commercial technically, but it was actually really informative. And the kids were asking about being a veterinarian. We were exchanging fun facts and did a little dance with the dog. So it was really, really fun. And the commercial that's on Nickelodeon's YouTube channel has 1.5 million views. So who knew that so many people cared to watch this, 10-minute segment about the Lego playset with a real vet. And so I kind of thought, okay, that was the end of it. And we're done with that. That was fun. But then they contacted me again later and said, okay, we now want to do basically a career day. And we want to have you and a firefighter doing a live play day, Lego play day live, where you're talking about being a veterinarian. And so again, I got to go up to LA, and this time it was a full-blown production. I had a trailer.
Wow.
And they treated me like a movie star for a day, which was just so cool and very different from my normal day-to-day work experience. It was a little surreal and kind of jarring, really. But it was really, really fun. And for that, it was actually a 30-minute segment with a host basically asking about, different things about becoming a vet. So this was aimed it wasn't a commercial this time. It was actually aimed at getting children to want to be veterinarians. And of course, the Lego playset is involved because it was put on by Lego. So it was a really, really cool experience. And during that process, and when the video came out, just numerous people that I knew and didn't know said, wow, you're actually really good at this randomly. You should have a show. You should have your own show. And, for a while I joked about it. I was like, yeah, I'll call Netflix tomorrow. And then enough people said it that I was like, well, maybe I should kind of like keep this momentum going. And so I decided to start a YouTube channel. And I, had thought about it for a while. There's so many different directions that I could have kind of taken it, and ultimately decided that I wanted to continue to engage younger people and kids to be interested in animals and wanting to be veterinarians or scientists. And, with the ultimate goal, of course, of being the next generation of conservation veterinarians and scientists. And, we can pass the baton to them because we've gotten them excited about it. And so it's been really fun. I started just by asking people I knew to send in questions from their kids, and I would just answer their questions. So it's called Ask Dr. Barb, and that's just the name of the series. And it's really fun. And I ended up getting questions from people I didn't know and answering children's questions from all over the country, and North America, actually. So it's been a really fun ride, and it seems like people are really enjoying it. There aren't that many real veterinarians that have YouTube channels. So there are plenty of, places out there where you can learn about animals. But I think having children see it come from a veterinarian is just kind of unique and different. And I try to do it in a really fun way. I have my dogs playing the piano, playing the drums, incorporating just enough silliness to keep people engaged and interested. And for me, it's fun because at work, I'm fairly serious most of the time. So this is a fun creative outlet where I can have my dog play the piano. And if you ever watch an episode, like in the beginning, I'm wearing a safari hat and a snorkeling mask. So it's just, a fun, kind of goofy, but informative way to kind of engage younger generations. And I will say I have gotten a lot of comments from older people, not just kids. Like, it's fun facts for anyone. You don't actually have to be a kid. The kids are asking questions, but a lot of the animal facts are just fun facts or things you actually didn't know that you didn't know. And, everyone can learn something new. So I had to take a little hiatus on the filming because of sitting for zoo boards, as I mentioned. So for about a year and a half, I've been studying pretty intensely for that. And I'm my own writer, content editor, fact checker, and video editor. So it actually takes a lot of hours that go into each episode of my time. So I had to put it on a little hiatus for the last year while I was studying for boards. But now I'm excited to kind of reinvigorate it and start it back up.
I love that. And yes, I understand since I do the same thing on how much time it takes. So I'm very impressed. I think it's great, a great way to reach the future generation that can come and into veterinary medicine. And I think you're right. I think that when we are in our profession, we forget that we know a lot. And so people don't always know these things. So no matter what age they are, they're going to find it interesting. It's going to be new for them. And animals are cool. People, I think, are interested in learning these facts. So kudos to you. Kudos to Lego for also bringing that in and starting that initiative. So that's fantastic. So as we wrap up, is there anything that you feel very strongly about or like to share with the kind of the veterinary profession?
Oh, that's such a great question. I think I touched on it a little bit earlier, but for the veterinary profession, kind of for those coming into it, those who are currently in it, and that we're all better together and we're stronger when we work together. And as I mentioned, there are just so many things that we still can improve upon or knowledge gaps that we can fill in. And if we collaborate and kind of share our ideas, that's imperative to move the medicine forward. And again, take care of all of these animals, both under our care and around the world, who need our help. And there's so many of those animals that exist that a lot of people just aren't aware of. So I think I also would, just like to highlight that it is imperative that we share our knowledge, and whether that's via an outreach program with Girl Scouts, writing research papers, having a YouTube channel, whatever it might be, we need other people to care. Like you said, the lawyer at home probably doesn't know that the Indus River dolphin in Pakistan is endangered and needs our help. So it's up to us to inform people and get them to care. And that's why, zoos and aquariums and accredited places like that are so important at getting people to care, because they won't know to care unless you make them aware of the issues and can explain it in a way that is engaging to them and just makes them really interested and passionate about it. So I think as we move forward and try to continue helping animals wherever they are, we need to keep that in mind, that working together to solve all these problems and getting the word out there are probably the most important things we can do.
Oh, goodness. I completely agree. And even if it is not wildlife, same thing with other animals as well. It is educating people, getting people to care about the stuff that we know that's important. So I think that can apply in a lot of areas in our profession. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Definitely.
Yeah.
All right. I share? I didn't mention the letter. You asked me to say it and I forgot about it.
Oh,
sure. The letter from the little girl.
Oh, yes.
So when I was in my hiatus from making my episodes because I was studying for boards, I received an email that literally brought a tear to my eye and kind of reminded me, like, okay, all of the effort that I'm going through to make these videos is actually worth it and is actually touching some people. I received this email with a question. So I asked people to email in questions if they don't want to send a video. And it was a mom from a 7-year-old in Texas. And she asked her daughter's question. And then she said, I just want to thank you for being a great role model. My daughter was worried that liking bats and snakes was weird, especially for a girl. And she was so excited to see videos featuring women doctors and scientists talking about some of her favorite animals. And that just touched me so much to know that this little girl out there thought it was weird for her to like animals, and just seeing myself or someone I had on my show liking these weird animals, that was okay. And that was cool, which I think is really awesome for little kids to know. Like, it's okay to be the nerdy kid who likes science and math and animals. We need those people, and we need them to care and to grow up, and we can pass the baton to them later. And I actually had another girl who sent in a photo where she dressed up as me, Dr. Barb, for Halloween, which was absolutely, my heart just melted. And she's my parents' neighbor back at home. And my heart just melted. I think, how cool is that? You've done something if someone dresses up as you for Halloween. So that was also really just special and kind of heartwarming, and enough to, even though it takes many hours and I do it just for fun, I make $0 out of it. It's, enough to keep me going and keep wanting to do it.
Oh my goodness. Yes, that's it. And I actually brought this up today, that those letters and those emails, the text messages, anytime that you have something like that on your mind, tell people. It makes such a huge difference when you tell people how much it means to you and that you are making an impact. So I'm so glad that that mom sent you the email and added the note into it, because that really does keep us going for sure.
Yeah, it was awesome.
All right. So your final 4 questions to wrap us up today is, what is something people get wrong about you?
I don't actually know for something people get wrong about me, because I am a pretty hard on your sleeve type of a person. I'm from Boston. I'm, pretty blunt sometimes, or at least straightforward. And you kind of always know what I'm thinking, or I'm pretty transparent, I guess. So I don't know that there's necessarily anything people get wrong about me. But I do have lots of interests that maybe people wouldn't know if they didn't ask.
Yeah, well, that's actually the second question. So what is a skill or an interest that probably not a lot of people know about?
So one of my favorite kind of side hobbies that I picked up a couple years ago is learning about being a bee vet. And so now that I've gotten over day one of Z boards, I kind of want to also reinvigorate this part of my interest in my career. So a few years ago, the USDA basically mandated that veterinarians need to prescribe antibiotics versus people who have honeybee hives being able to go to a feed store, let's say, and get the antibiotics over the counter. Mm-hmm. So there, all of a sudden in 2017 became this big demand for bee veterinarians, and the veterinary community kind of looked around each other and said, do you know a bee vet? I don't know a bee vet. I don't know anything about bees. We did not learn about them in school. And so they're out of the woodworks came all of these courses to train veterinarians to be bee veterinarians. And so I ended up taking lots of courses just on the weekends in my own time because I just thought it was fascinating. And I think honeybees are so fascinating and they really need our help. They're also endangered and, face a lot of threats from climate change and human impacts. So just super fascinating to learn about their physiology and their medicine and how their hive system works. And so that's one of my side hobbies that I also want to work on is I've taken all the courses. Now I need to go learn how to handle bees. I haven't done that part yet. So that's also very important to being a bee vet, I think. So that's my next step.
Well, I was about to ask, do you have bees? And so it sounds like you'll at least go learn soon.
Yes. Since I live in San Diego in a fairly small house, I don't have enough backyard space to legally have my own bees. So I have friends who have bees and I need to go learn on their bees and, work with beekeepers in the community. And the business cards make themselves, I think. Dr. Bees Bees.
There you go.
For the bees knees.
You're already getting your marketing. I love it. So
yeah. We're already halfway there. I just need to go handle some bees. I think that might be a crucial step.
Yeah. Well, that's really cool. I have noticed the interest rise, even in veterinarians. Dr. Mayab, he was one of my first episodes. He has bees himself. And so I was getting into it. So yeah, it is a great interest. So that's really cool. We need more people to know more, especially in our profession. So yeah,
definitely.
Now, you have done a lot of things that are probably on people's bucket list, but what is something that is still on your bucket list?
Oh, I have lots of things on my bucket list. Most of them revolve around travel or animals or traveling to see animals. So things like diving the Great Barrier Reef is definitely at the top of my list. And I think the top because, the reef is not doing so well and getting smaller and smaller over the years because of climate change and ocean changes. So definitely going to see the Great Barrier Reef while it's still beautiful and before we totally wipe it out. And going on an African safari. That is definitely up there. So traveling to Africa and seeing all of the animals that I've seen at the zoo or learned about for zoo boards and going to see them in their natural habitat, I think would be just absolutely breathtaking.
Yes, it is. That's amazing. Awesome. And finally, what is something that you are most grateful for?
There are definitely many things, but I think, in talking about my career, definitely my family's support, because I definitely couldn't have gotten here without their support. It's a pretty, long road to really get to a job like a zoo or wildlife or aquatic vet. And so I couldn't have done it without them. But then also the mentorship, the great mentorship I received at every single step of my journey. So, from my early education all the way up to my current job, I definitely wouldn't be here without all of the great, support and advice and encouragement and wisdom that helped shape my career path and also, me as a veterinarian. So from my first research mentor in undergrad, Dr. Farnham, to Marty Helena, who taught me during my fellowship, which is like a really formative experience when you're in your specialty internship. My cousin Rick, who gave me great advice along the way since he actually worked in the exact office that I sit in now daily. He did it 30 years ago. Wow. So throughout the process and, many, many professors during vet school, of course, or in externships, people who think they don't impact someone's life, like never forget that there's probably someone out there who's remembering a sentence you said to them for their whole life. And I could say that I could, list off all the people along the way who said one thing that really stuck with me and kind of helped me get to where I am today. So definitely the great mentorship is something that I'm super grateful for and continue to be grateful for because I'm still receiving great mentorship every day where I work now.
This has been the Vet Life Reimagined podcast. Whether you are listening or watching on YouTube, I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Please make sure you are subscribed to catch all these amazing people in our profession. Also, send this episode to someone you think who would appreciate it. Have a recommendation for someone who would be a good guest? Please reach out on LinkedIn, Instagram, or Facebook. There aren't that many Dr. Sprinkles. Until next time, Vet Lifers.